Hey guys, Martial Arts Militia here. My name is Matthew, and today's video is going to be a book review on The Science of Regeneration by Raymond W. Bernard. Now, I heard of this book while I was rolling around on the NoFap Reddits, looking for books that people kind of suggested for self-improvement on their journey. And somebody had brought up the physiological methods of female and male regeneration. So in the old book, he just said it was 1955. It is something that is, I don't know what it's called. It's kind of like when music or books are like free because either they're so old or they're just so important to like cultural context. And this book is one of them. Even though I bought a physical copy, you don't have to. You can just literally get the book for free online. And it's a very short book. It's only 88 pages, but it's packed with a lot of information, and the author does a very good job with his references and saying where the information he's talking about is coming from. He does a very good job on that. And with the 88 pages, it is split into two chapters, I guess you could say. First one is dealing more with the men, and the second one is dealing more with the women, although the author has a tendency to like jump back and forth between the two and jump in back and forth between subjects. So very disorganized. I think it kind of gives a good look into his brain, like he's like when he gets information, I think he absorbs it, but then he has trouble categorizing it, so he'll like jump back and forth into stuff. That's why this book review took so long to do, because I would take notes and then it would talk about this subject and then jump to this one, then jump back to this one. So I had to put a lot of work to kind of get it organized to something just more presentable. Hopefully I've done a good job of that today. But the first thing I want to talk about is kind of like what I would say the author's credibility, and not in a bad way, but just more constructive criticism. I do think the author has a tendency to fall into confirmation bias, so he'll find information that can prove his point and he'll kind of quickly latch onto that, but then anytime there's information that could question his case or deny it, he almost just doesn't talk about it, so kind of your classic confirmation kind of bias thing. The examples I use for that is that he refers to three individuals in the beginning of the book. He talks about Thomas Parr, he's a British man that lived to 152. He talks about Li Chung-yun, he's a Chinese man who lived to 256. Okay, okay. And then of course we got Milo of Croton, who's a man who's a very strong dude. And with those examples, he'll kind of lean to be like, oh, they're all vegetarian or they're all vegan, right? Which is not necessarily true, because certainly, at least when it comes to Thomas Parr, he did pass away when he ate the king's meat dishes. So, there's kind of some assumption there that meat is bad for you. Yeah, science is out on that. And then for Li Chung-yun, yeah, that's true. He may have never eaten meat, or at least we don't know. We don't even know if he's a real dude, to be honest. But his true birth date was never verified. And again, like 256. Who's gonna believe somebody's 256? I mean, you need a lot of evidence for that. But a lot of consistencies with that character. True birth date never verified. Described as having good eyesight, but we know that Jeanne Calment, she's a French woman. She had failing eyesight at 122, and she is verified to be that old. So, and she stopped smoking because she felt bad asking people to light her cigarettes because she couldn't see at 122. But this Chinese dude at 250 is gonna have no problem seeing. I guess his vision is good. Let's see, and then his date of death and location are verified. I mean, there you go. Raymond doesn't say that in the book. Okay. And then Li himself actually says he was born in 1736, but Chengdu professor said that it was 1677 because of congratulations letters on longevity from the king. Now keep in mind that's a political thing, whether you talk about a government or a king, a monarchy, it doesn't matter, there's always a political reason for them to do something. So just because the king said, hey, good job for being 150 years old, I mean, there could be something going on behind the scenes on that, so I really wouldn't just buy that entirely. Also, 256 happens to be the number of good luck in Chinese, so once again, too many coincidences, and I think Raymond should have mentioned that, rather than present his case as this is legit. You should kind of bring out and say things that are highly questionable. With Milo of Croton, yes, he did follow the principles of vegetarianism, but there are plenty of times where he ate meat. He would almost eat up to 20 pounds of meat a day. you know. So he'd actually be more of a Mediterranean diet, only indulging for celebrations. And I think there's a story from my little Croton, you know, the Olympics is every 4 years back then. He would carry a baby calf every day, you know, up until the Olympics. So 4 years later, the calf is big, you know, grown up. And, you know, that's his strength training. He would go to the Olympics, whether they're being held or not, carrying the calf. Then after 4 years, the Olympics are being held, he'd kill the calf and then probably feed it to everybody and himself. So, you know, once again, you know, leaving out information for kind of his, you know, I guess what he would want to be true or expect to be true. But outside of those cases, you know, moving on to the meat of the book, Raymond does say that sex hormones, which in this case are going to be estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. Now the jobs of those, actually estrogen is developing female sexual characteristics, obviously. Progesterone is involved with the menstrual cycle and pregnancy. Testosterone regulates bone mass, muscle mass, and sperm production for the man. And then dihydrotestosterone is involved in the male body hair and the reproductive organs. You know, so those seem to be the 4 sex organs that I could find, or sex hormones I could find online. There may be more, but it seems like those were kind of like the main 4. So the author says that the endocrine glands are the key to eternal youth, as when the sex glands weaken, all other endocrines begin to suffer. And without sex hormone production, old age and senility accelerates. Now, in your body, in everybody's body, in my body, we all have sex hormones. We actually guys have estrogen too, and girls have testosterone as well. Obviously at a much lower level, depending on your DNA codes, which would be XY for me as a man and XX for a woman, you know. So yes, we probably have, well, I don't think we have progesterone as men, because, you know, we don't do menstrual cycle or pregnancy, but you do have, you know, at least 75% of the sex hormones, right? That's in your just regular body, regular blood. But he references a Dr. Frank, who showed that sex hormones in the menstrual blood is 6 times the concentration than the general body, which could explain why women are low in iron depending how often they menstruate. Dr. Mosher, as a female doctor, also believes that menstruation of civilized women is far too excessive. Now, if we know that it's true that there is more sex hormones in the women's menstrual blood, it would only make sense that there's probably just as much more sex hormones in the man's semen, right? I mean, if the menstrual blood has a lot of sex hormones, obviously the semen does too, for the man version anyways. Now, sex hormones can be lost through sexual stimulation by internal emission, ejaculation, menstruation, and the author believes that continual menstruation will result in a menopause. Now, this could be tested if the nuns of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faith show no signs of menopause at the age of 45 to 55. And the author does mention a few cases of those, but those are anecdotes, so we can't really do much with that. Unfortunately, science has convinced society that menopause is bad, to the point where actually modern day nuns are on birth control now. So unfortunately, we can't test that, or at least we would know, right? Now, the gonads, which is going to be the testes for the man and the ovaries for the woman, it's the key to youth, as eunuchs and castrates age faster. That's what the author says. However, farmers know that castrated sheep live longer. And a study in 1969 showed that 319 eunuchs had a lifespan 13 and a half years longer than intact males. Now, in my opinion, is that because the castrated individuals are not driven to work as hard as uncastrated men, therefore they live longer by working less? And there are anecdotes about castrated men being more docile and easier to control. And of course, that is a barbaric practice that we did back in history. If a guy was too strong or too difficult to control, they would castrate him, okay? And then of course they say, yeah, you know, he's not as driven, he's easier to control. So that was used as a barbaric punishment back then. Now, the author says that the body conducts 2 secretions. There is an internal secretion and there is an external secretion, and they are not separate from another. So they will not occur, the internal secretion doesn't happen if the external secretion is happening too often. Now, what happens here is that the external secretion would be like, obviously, menstruation for the women, ejaculation for the man. If this action is not conducted, then it appears that the fluid is taken up by glandular tissue into the blood in the internal secretion. It doesn't occur at all with frequent ejaculation, and I would assume frequent menstruation as well. Therefore, the loss of sex hormones in semen and menstrual blood never get taken up by the blood, causing early senility and death, like the castrated individuals. Now, seminal absorption may not only occur in seminal vesicles by lymphatic ducts, but also in the epididymis, where it stays until voluntarily or involuntarily expended, which kind of you'll probably hear in the NoFap Reddits, that 90-day timeline, which is really just about like when your addiction starts to weaken and your executive function comes back and you're able to make a little bit more controlled decision, right? Where before the addiction kind of controlled you. Otherwise, it gets absorbed into the blood, producing changes in the hair, beard, voice, and manners. Author indicates that these changes don't occur in eunuchs. I would like to see studies on that. I'm not doubting, I'm interested, you know. The author states that Professor Lidston, who is one of the popular scientists at the time, was willing to stand by this statement, whereas society back in 1955 was already trying to make masturbation and excessive sex the cultural norm. So if you think it's bad now, looks like it's been bad for quite a while. Now, the book references that 1 ounce of semen is equal to 40 ounces of blood. Now in Ayurveda, which is kind of like Indian medicine, like Indian, Ayurveda says that 40 drops of blood makes a drop of bone marrow, and 40 drops of bone marrow makes a drop of semen. So the value of each component appears to be worth 2.5% preceding semen. So, you know, just to let you know just how kind of valuable it is, right? We have a lot of blood, we have limited bone marrow. Well, yes, we have a lot of semen, but you can see that, you know, as it gets to semen, it takes more and more material, right? So it's costing more just to get a little bit of it. So probably not worth throwing that away, we'll say. Now, Dr. Brown-Seckert, he had an elixir of life injection. There is a book on that, which you don't have to pay for, but I'll just spoil it for you. Basically, the elixir of life injection was really just testicular extract. So basically, he'd have the testicles of animals castrated, he'd crush them into like a fluid, and then put it in a syringe and then inject it in people and himself. And it worked, you know, like he had more energy, more drive, more motivation, and his patients did too as well, you know. So and that book's not very long, so I mean, it's okay for me to spoil it for you. It's just balls. It's just crushed balls, and then you just inject the liquid. That's it. So obviously there must be a lot of sex hormones and lecithin in testicles. Now, the author believes that involuntary emission is the same or similar to voluntary emissions. He refers to the case of a man who came to French physician Tussaud about frequent nocturnal emissions. We don't know if he indulged in voluntary emission as well. But the writer does note another case where a man gave up sexual indulgence with his wife, lived in continence, but he still had nocturnal emissions to the point where he had low vitality, and he ended up having a stynic operation done. That's kind of the fancy word for vasectomy. So what we call vasectomy, they called the stynic operation back then. I guess that was the dude that did it first. So it appears that nocturnal emission is just as damaging as a voluntary loss. I know you'll see that a lot if you read the NoFap Reddits, that, you know, the wet dreams aren't as bad, or they're the same, and, you know, people have different opinions, but I think it's not as bad. But when you have enough of it, it's pretty bad, you know. I think there was a point where it's like almost every 10 days for me. That was bad. Okay, now the author says that lecithin is believed to be a chief component of the endocrine glands, and it aids the body in metabolic processes. It's abundant in nerve and brain cells, and it produces electricity through oxidation. Nerve and brain activity are impossible without it. Now, Glidden Company had experiments where they showed that animals with lecithin supplemented diets tended to live longer, they had a greater health than a control group without the supplemented lecithin. Fun fact, Bruce Lee actually had lecithin in his protein drink as well. So if there was one dude that would ever be obsessed about, you know, functional, 100% maximum functional body, you know, it would be Bruce Lee. Youthful sex glands are rich in lecithin, and senile glands are deficient. The brain and gonads compete for lecithin in the blood. So, you know, if you know that joke from Robin Williams, you know, God gave man a brain and a penis, but only enough blood to run one or the other. Ain't it the truth? Prostatic secretion is rich in lecithin. So most likely the mucus discharge of a woman, or the lubrication, whatever you want to call it, must be similar as well. So that means that they have more sex hormones and lecithin than the menstruation itself, or possibly the ejaculation of the man as well. And women experience spectral mood changes before the actual hemorrhage or soon after. Now, the author is going to call menstruation a hemorrhage afterwards, hemorrhage is blood loss, like negatively. So just keep in mind that's their interpretation for now. I'm using their words. I don't think we call it a hemorrhage right now in 2024, but that's just what Guthrie says. Dr. Guthrie believes that the mucus discharge is a loss of calcium, preventing the hemorrhage of menstruation. Okay, so basically he's saying that, well, when women menstruate, there is a mucus discharge that occurs first. And I'm not a girl, but I'm certain, I don't know, maybe you girls know if that's true or not. So before the menstruation, there's actually mucus discharge. Once that's gone, then the menstruation occurs. So then the doctor is saying that, that mucus discharge may have a lot of calcium and be preventing the menstruation. But once that's lost through, as the author will say, sexual activity, then the menstruation occurs. So in this case, basically you'll see in NoFap that there's the bargaining phase, as every addiction has, right? Every addiction has their bargaining phase where, instead of, a pack of cigarettes, maybe half pack of cigarettes. No different here. So for NoFap, for porn addiction, it would just be like there's the porn, the masturbation, the orgasm. So maybe just porn and don't masturbate, or maybe just masturbate, no porn. It doesn't matter. Okay, any sexual excitation is going to draw away your sex hormones, lecithin, calcium, phosphorus, cholesterol from the blood into your gonads. So again, testes for the man, ovaries for the woman, and it's going to be lost through urination or if you ejaculate, whatever, right? So for the edgelords out there, right? There's no room for edge. You're still going to lose sex hormones through the prostatic secretion and the mucosal discharge, which are rich in sex hormones and lecithin. Now, the pineal gland contains more lecithin than any other part of the body, and it secretes melatonin for sleep. And honestly, most of science doesn't really know what it does besides that. They say just sleep, but I mean, for it to have the most lecithin and its only job is just to help you sleep, I don't know, it's a little sus. The thymus gland also has a lot of lecithin. The thymus gland makes and trains white blood cells, T cells, to aid the immune system in fighting disease and infection. Most of it is created before birth and childhood, and there's no indication of creation afterwards. And I think also they've done experiments where they remove the thymus gland after birth and childhood, and nothing happened. So it wasn't a big deal. So that's why they say that it does its job before birth and childhood and doesn't seem to do anything afterwards when you're a teenager and adult. Even though some sources say it slows down. So it may still be training, white blood cells, but honestly, I don't think most scientists will go beyond that statement. Okay, so the author makes a link between mental illness and masturbation. As somebody that works with mental illness myself, I don't know if I would go with that, but I found that section pretty interesting. So basically he's saying that the brain depends on lecithin for proper functioning, and the normal content range is 28%, but the brains of the insane have 14%, or half. Now the first question I'd ask is, well, what qualifies as insane in 1955? I think it may be just a little bit more broad than right now in 2024. But I do think that's pretty interesting that the brains of the insane do have half the percent of lecithin that most, we'll just say people without SMI do. That stands for severe mental illness. Now, he references Dr. Spitzka, who believes that the excess loss of lecithin through overstimulated sexual activity can cause insanity. In his book, hold it, this is a really good title, Masturbatic Insanity. That's a really good title. He investigates several cases of people that were normal but became insane as a result of sexual excess in the marriage relation. Once again, there's going to be a difference in the interpretation of the term mental illness from 1955 to today, so I would like to, kind of bridge that gap or just find out what the differences are. And it would also seem that anti-masturbation may not have only had a religious context, but possibly a secular one as well. Because people always be like, oh, only religious people are anti-masturbation. Well, I mean, this dude doesn't really give any indication of being religious, and this is clearly a scientific, nothing to do with religion at all. So I mean, even though people just assume it's religious, I mean, if you go by just this science, that would be anti-masturbation as well. So, let's see. So the old authors attribute sexual excess to insanity. Syncope, I had to look that up, means loss of consciousness. Epilepsy, loss of memory, blindness, baldness, and death. And in parentheses, some in women. So I didn't know that. It's interesting. Ellis mentions a case of a man whose 3 wives all became insane after marrying him. saying that sexual excess causes great physical exertion with suspicions and delusions. Now that's literally one line in the book, and I had to read it like 10 times because I didn't know what he was saying. But I think what he's trying to say is that this Chattius von Chattington had 3 wives. I guess he had sex with them all, no problem, all the time. And so, those women are losing their sex hormones, their lecithin, calcium, phosphorus, to the point where it's so deficient that, as he says, they became insane. So I think that's what he's saying, but it's literally one line in the book, and it's like, I got nothing else to help it with. So that's my interpretation. Now, the author says that orgasm constitutes shocks to the nervous system by loss of lecithin and sex hormones. And he references cases of elderly men dying from nervous system shock from copulation because of increased blood pressure and heart rate till peak at orgasm. Now, I don't doubt that. I think that makes sense, but I think it makes sense that he's not separating orgasm and ejaculation. Obviously, that's normal that we put those two together. So what I'd be surprised about is, okay, well, what if you separated the two? Now, some places, some cultures do talk about that. I think China and India talk about that. You can separate orgasm and ejaculation, at least for the man. That's their interpretation, but I guess what I want to know is that, would that work in this case? So do we know, okay, we know we're losing sex hormones from ejaculation, but do you lose sex hormones from orgasm without the ejaculation? I would say yes, because remember, when you're sexually stimulated, the prostatic secretion, the mucosal discharge, the vaginal lubrication, you're still losing sex hormones. So even if you don't ejaculate, it's still bad for you, right? But I wanted to bring up kind of this, I think it's a story from China about Sunu and the Yellow Emperor. It's like a book that I don't know, I just heard about, I never read the book. But they're talking about, a guy who would have an orgasm without an ejaculation, right? And she's saying this is what will happen if you go through it 10 times. Jeez. So the first one act without emission makes the chi strong, right? And then 2 acts without emission makes the hearing acute and vision clear. 3 acts without emission makes all ailments disappear. 4 acts without emission and the 5 spirits are all at peace. I had to look that up. So that's actually traditional Chinese medicine where imbalances are believed to result in psychiatric disorders. And the 5 spirits are Shen, which is the mind and connecting spirit. There's Hun, which is the non-corporeal spirit. There's Po, the corporeal spirit. Zi, the will and wisdom, and Yi, which is intellect and thought. So it's traditional Chinese medicine, kind of like Ayurveda's Indian medicine. So, for us Americans, right, we're not really going to know much about it, but that's what it's referring to. Now, 5 acts without emission makes the pulse full and relaxed. 6 acts without emission strengthens the waist and back. You could always go to the gym. 7 acts gives power to the buttocks and thigh. You could always squat. 8 acts without emission causes the whole body to be radiant. 9 acts without emission and one will enjoy unlimited longevity. 10 acts without emission and one attains the realm of the immortals. Sounds like it was the dude with 3 wives. He must have been the one. But yeah, the author is, I don't think he would have thought about guys that could orgasm and not ejaculate. I think he's linking the two together, which makes sense in 1955. So when he's contributing like orgasm is a bad thing, then it's like, oh, well, but you're linking it to ejaculation. What if you could separate the two? And I don't think he would have known about that. But still, as I said in my interpretation, I still think if you could do that, orgasm is still bad because you're losing sex hormones through the prostatic secretion anyways. Maybe not as quickly, but I don't think... I don't know if Sunu is telling the Yellow Emperor some truth here, but I still think it's a bad idea if you were able to orgasm and not ejaculate, much less 10 times. I don't know. As a 35-year-old virgin, I don't know, and I couldn't test it, so that's that. Now, Hutchinson records 3 cases of temporary blindness in men by sexual excess after marriage. Now, I do know there was a recent study that showed a guy who had too much vitamin A, and he was temporarily blind. But as soon as his vitamin A levels came down to normal, so whatever like supplements he was taking or whatever he was eating, he reduced it, it came down, his blindness went away. So there seems to be some link between vitamin A and vitamin K as well. It may have something to do with your vision. If you have too much vitamin A, you can cause temporary blindness. If you have too little of vitamin A and vitamin K, you could also get temporary blindness. Okay. So of course, is there a link with the sex hormones, lecithin, calcium, phosphorus, cholesterol in regards to vitamin A and vitamin K? And based on what I could find in my research, I think that, so first of all, vitamin A, it's a precursor to your sex hormones. So you actually need vitamin A in order to make sex hormones. So then is it possible that if you are overindulging in sex, you lose all your sex hormones, then your body goes, it stops taking whatever the reserves it has. Does it begin to take the vitamin A reserves, right? Because you ain't got any sex hormones to give. And then you can possibly see the blindness, which I don't know if there's been a recent case of that, but at least compared to this, it seems to be. Lecithin increases absorption and storage of vitamin A. So therefore, if you're overindulging, then obviously you're slowing down the absorption and you have a low storage of vitamin A. Once again, could lead to temporary blindness. Let's see. The author says that anything is excess when procreation is not the end. I have seen that quoted quite a few times on NoFap. First of all, everyone's body is their business, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I will say that if you think about what you're losing, here in this book and your sex hormones and your drive and stuff like that, you don't have to just be like, well, it should only be to have kids. That's your decision, But I'm going to say that, based on what you lose, I mean, it might as well be something kind of as important as a kid, I would say. But again, I respect people's personal boundaries. That's your own decision to deal with. Darwin observes that brains of rabbits diminish in size under domestication, and domesticated animals have more frequent mating seasons and reproductive activity than wild ones. Domesticated animals don't have to worry about food and shelter, so then the priority shifts to reproduction. I am going to make a reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you need comfort, shelter, you need food, you need warmth, and then meaning's at the top, whatever your destiny is, and then reproduction is somewhere up there too. So obviously when your lower needs aren't met, you're not really thinking about sex, or at least reproduction. Ellis's book, Man and Woman, shows female brains are 25% heavier than a man's brain and finer texture. Women have a larger thyroid gland with 3 lobes, men only have 2. Now the author kind of goes on an interesting route here, saying that the woman is superior to the man, that she's designed to be better than a guy. That's his interpretation, he can have it. I wouldn't interpret it that way. What I would interpret it is this. First of all, in neuroscience, which is settled science, everyone's brain is a female brain, okay? So now you say, well, where do the guys come from? Well, first of all, when your DNA code, so people say that you're your brain, you're your heart. I disagree, you're your DNA code. It's something in your DNA, that's the real you. So whatever you said, right? You said, in my case, mine said XY, right? So it said, make this dude a boy, right? And so the brain, which was woman, when it read the code, make a man, then it floods the brain with testosterone, makes me think like a man, look like a man, act like a man, have man parts, okay? But in somebody else, if their DNA code read XY, nothing would happen. Nothing would happen, and then they would, think like a girl, act like a girl, have girl parts. You know what I mean? That's it. That's the only two options. Nothing else happens. It's just those two. So for him to say that, because a woman's brain is heavier, 25% heavier, then that's superior. Well, no. How do you know that's not just a characteristic of having XX? Or the woman's brain is a smooth texture. Well, once again, maybe that's a characteristic of XX, right? Women have a larger thyroid gland with 3 lobes. I mean, is that really superior? Or again, is that just saying, hey, this is what a girl's brain looks like, XX, right? Here's the guy's brain. Or here's the girl's thyroid gland, here's the guy's thyroid gland. He can think what he wants, but I just thought, don't you think it could just be nothing more than, the expression of the characteristic of the gender? I don't know why I'm tired. Anyways, next we're going to move on to male continence strategies. So for continence here, we're talking about, as the author suggests, if you don't want to lose your sex hormones, you don't want to lose your lecithin, then you don't want to masturbate, you don't want to jack off, you don't want to watch porn, okay. And how does that work? Well, if you're watching something and you're excited, remember, the excitement alone is going to take away your sex hormones and your lecithin. Okay, so even if you're watching and not doing anything, it's the same thing. You're still losing something, okay? So with male continence strategies, we're talking about what the guy can do besides, not having, we could even say meaningless sex, like most people do these days, right? Don't do that. Don't watch porn, don't masturbate, right? So here, the author talks about the Steinic operation, which I mentioned before. It's really just the old term for vasectomy, okay? And the experiments were done where it rejuvenated old rats with new coats and endocrine glands that regenerated as well. So with no place to go, the sperm is ultimately reabsorbed into the bloodstream. But this can still fail by sexual overindulgence because we just talked about, your sperm has sex hormones, your semen has sex hormones, your prostatic secretion has sex hormones. So even if you save one of the three, you're still losing 66% of the sex hormones. So of course they can still fail if you were having too much sex, too many sexual thoughts, or too much masturbation. Now, sexual excitement draws sex hormones less than calcium and phosphorus from the blood into the gonads in preparation for procreation. The process cannot be reversed. These components will ultimately be ejaculated or urinated out. So even if you don't ejaculate, you're still going to urinate it out. The Steinic operation is temporary. Now, Dr. Voronov is another person who's research into sex gland implantation. He started on animals, so he would implant sex glands on castrated animals, and then he would move to implantation of monkey testicles onto humans. And his observation was that rejuvenation was temporary for the man because it seemed that the sex glands take on the characteristics of the organism and begin to decay. That's a fair interpretation, but what I would say is that, well, this dude did same species transplants and it worked fine. I think the reason why is because they were the same species. When you tried to do monkeys to humans, that's not the same species, right? And we have systems in our body that says, hey, this is not human material. Hey, this is not my material. Attack it, right? We have body cells that do that. So he could have that. He could have that interpretation, and we couldn't do this today. But I think the real test would have been you castrated a guy, get another guy, castrate him, but put that on the other guy. Then you could see if it would work. And I would guess that it probably wouldn't work because we know from like heart transplants and other organs that if the DNA is not close enough, the body will still attack it. So we don't need to do the experiment, but I'm just saying that rather than saying that like, oh, it doesn't work, well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't work, but I think it's more because the DNA doesn't match, or the DNA can identify that this is not me or it's not close enough, it's a threat. But again, they wouldn't have known that in 1955, so it's fine, but, I think his interpretation was that it came down to auto-intoxication, which is basically that it's like intestinal degeneration, which I think is pretty much proven false by today's scientific standards. But that's okay. That's they're stuck with the information that they're limited with. So it's fine. Now, Dr. Brinkley did an experiment as well where he put the sex glands adjacent to the senile testicles. In this case, he did goat to human, and it worked temporarily, just like Voronov's. But once again, it can fail by sexual overindulgence and ultimately temporary. And once again, it's because we know today. The body, it must be close to the human, the transplantee's DNA. And if it's not, it will ultimately be attacked in the end. Now, for the female continence strategies, the author talks about cold water. Hold on. Can I give you guys a break? Because it's like 30 minutes. My computer is going to die. Oh no, what did I do with the, here it is. What did I do with the charger? Yeah. We don't have too much to go through, but I just don't want my computer to die. Because then I have to remember all the stuff that I wrote down. No way in hell I'm going to remember all that stuff. You know how long it took to make this outline? Like, weeks. Weeks, guys! It took weeks! Okay, let's continue, shall we? Female continence strategy. So the author talks about cold water contracting uterine blood vessels, reducing hemorrhage. So I'm a pretty big fan of cold showers, but I can see how most people would not be. However, to use this as a way to, for female continence, you do see that on NoFap where people say like take a cold shower, which I don't know. Maybe it works. I think it's just for the endorphins, which is good for you. But to think that the cold water would contract the uterine blood vessels, I don't know. I'm not a girl, maybe you guys can tell me, I don't know. But I'll just say cold showers is good no matter what. But I don't know if it's going to help with your continence and celibacy. Now, women acrobats with high strength and vigor also do not menstruate at all or very often. It's well known that modern day female gymnasts don't menstruate at all because of the high level of athleticism they maintain. That is true. I did gymnastics for 4 years, and I don't think any of the girls ever had a period, which would make sense, right? Because if the woman's purpose is to have a kid, but then they're training all the time, well, you can't just be in a vulnerable state, right? So then the hormones must do something to prevent that and be like, nope, we're not menstruating. Just keep all your strength, and then when you're comfortable, oh, okay, I want a kid now. Then see that would make sense. But yes, it is pretty common for a lot of high-level athlete women not to have their period or menstruate very often or at all. Anthropologists show that primitive women menstruate very little or at all. Women of Lapland menstruate annually or none at all. Author states that many wild animals only menstruate when they're domesticated, overfed, and overstimulated sexually. Only the female ape does not, but that's possibly because of sexual indulgence. Women from the country menstruate far less than women from the city. There's no comfort on the farm. City life is very comfortable. The author mentions Amazons which do not menstruate. Theoretically, it's possible if they overtrain and have a low-protein diet. However, the legends and stories of Amazons is only like stories. Nobody actually has any real evidence. And if they were real, they would have been assimilated into a man's tribe anyways through marriage and childbirth. So kind of doesn't matter. Let's see. Joan of Arc is assumed not to menstruate. That may have to do with the 100 Years' War. Which actually wasn't 100 years, but that's just what they call it. And how the food supplies were likely low in protein, not environment for intimacy, much less childbirth, just like World War I. So it was taken as a sign of her being a witch, so other women must have been menstruating pretty normally. The author mentions Kegels in a horizontal position. So I didn't know Kegels were that old, but yes, I guess they knew about it in 1955. Yeah, there's Kegels and reverse Kegels. I mean, I used to do them, but honestly, I don't know. I can't say there was much of a difference for assistance with continence, but it's up to you if you want to practice that or not. Now we're going to move into a diet section. So we talked about, the possible strategies for continence, for the man and the woman, mostly having to do with just keeping a more physical, mental, spiritual approach to celibacy, right? So another angle is going to be the diet. So a high-protein diet seems to stimulate nocturnal emissions, and low-protein diet makes them disappear. The author talks about an experiment of 24 college men conducted by Dr. Benedict, where meat and any food rich in protein were restricted in 1919 during World War I. That's because, during the World War, we didn't know what was going to happen, so there's a lot of food restrictions in place. And interesting fact, a lot of the blandness in British cuisine may have come from that restriction and stayed in their food culture for many years afterwards. But I would like to say the British cuisine has immediately upgraded in the past decade. It's gone up much, much higher. They just got used to it and they stick with it, and people make fun of them for that. Once again, they're really good now, so I really wouldn't say talking smack right now. Nocturnal emission in leukorrhea is believed to be excess protein metabolism reaction. It seems that the kidneys are responsible for removing nitrogenous waste products, and too much protein where the kidney cannot do this will call for the aid of the sex glands to help. That's the difference between a wet dream and a nocturnal emission is where a lot of pressure is felt in the groin without the presence of sex dreams. I've had both in this journey where it's an actual sex dream, but then I've had nothing, and I just feel intense pressure in my groin, and then end up being a nocturnal emission. But there was no sex dream involved. So that's the only difference. Not really that big of a deal though. Now, menstruation is believed to be the counterpart of nocturnal emission, and the women's menstruation disappeared in World War I when food was rationed to low meat and protein, and it seemed to return when the men came back from war. So, there's obviously a combination of the low protein, sex gland congestion by excitation. The author mentions that nuns have a menstruation of a day, and prostitutes can have menstruations up to 2 weeks. He suggests staying away from foods that produce uric acid, other protein metabolism end products. So for here, what we're going to want to look at, according to the author, is avoiding sexual stimulation, eating a low protein diet, low uric acid, maybe vegetarian kind of a diet. I can confirm that excess non-meat protein also counts, because I thought it was just meat. So I would have extra protein shakes and extra protein bars. Then I had a wet dream. Well, no, I didn't have nocturnal emission is what I meant. There was no sex. So So yes, even though if you can get a lot of protein that's not meat-based, it doesn't matter. You can still have a high enough protein level to where you'll get a wet dream no matter what. Dr. McDougall of London reports that tea and coffee seem to aggravate spermatorrhea and leukorrhea. Now, those are kind of like really old terms, which is basically like too many wet dreams for a man, and I think for a woman too. I don't think it's too much menstruation, but I think it's too much for wet dreams for the women as well. Llewellyn mentions a case where a man's nocturnal emission stopped when he discontinued coffee. I think that's kind of a genetic disposition because everybody drinks coffee and it doesn't seem like everybody's having wet dreams all day. Doesn't seem that way to me. Cocoa is considered to be an aphrodisiac because of the alkaloid theobromine. It seems that this is mostly present in dark chocolate, so maybe milk and white chocolate aren't so bad. White chocolate being mostly cocoa butter, not cocoa powder. So I'm wondering if it's the caffeine, because cocoa butter doesn't have any caffeine. I think more studies need to determine if cocoa butter and herbal teas increase uric acid. If so, then the culprit may be more caffeine than the product entity as a whole. Cases of men in tobacco industries who also experience involuntary emissions, which are even more marked in women. Believe smoking makes women sterile, believed to produce cancer. Yeah, you're right. In 2024, you were correct. He refers to an experiment of blowing tobacco smoke on the ears of rabbits, and they got cancer. So, yes, it's true. Even though I wasn't there, but I remember the commercials and like, oh, smoking doesn't cause cancer. I'm like, yeah, it does. Good, nice try. Dr. Hay showed that women who suffer profuse menstruation lessened and disappeared when they're put on a uric acid-free diet, mostly low-protein vegetarian. Similar results with the men. Seafood, coffee, and tea contain uric acid in preformed condition. Drinking water can help flush out uric acid. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I was wondering about it. I couldn't really find any conclusive evidence for that. Tea raises the blood pressure. Modern tests show that green and black tea confirmation, possibly the caffeine. So I'm saying that the caffeine is what's increasing the blood pressure, not necessarily like herbal teas or non-caffeinated teas is my assumption. So yeah, I think they need to see if that's really the tea that's increasing the blood pressure or it's the actual caffeine. The Irish alkaline diet consists of potatoes, vegetables, and buttermilk. Potatoes have a lot of protein though. French diet stated to be meat, fish, and wine. So here he's saying that like, okay, so high protein. I guess, well, the author seems to think that the French are more maybe sexually excited than the Irish. Now, Blatherwick finds that urine tends to be more alkaline with fruits and vegetables than potatoes, and it's more acid with meat, fowl, fish, eggs, and wheat. The acidity of the urine is believed to irritate the urethra of the male and female species, leading to increased sexual desire. Blatherwick's studies seem to indicate that baked potatoes and cantaloupe are the most alkaline foods. I do remember a middle school teacher talking about, like, asked us what really yellow urine meant besides eating a lot of meat. Dark yellow urine is more acidic, I assume. I think the urine's lighter if you drink a lot of water, which is basic, of course. And I remember taking a riboflavin B12 supplement, a super vitamin B complex, and I noticed my urine was really yellow. But that could also just mean getting rid of excess vitamins too. You know, because some vitamins are water soluble, so if you have too much, you'll just urinate it out. Okay, salt and spices believed to cause sex desire. However, you do need 2.5 grams of salt a day for survival. And the spiciness probably depends on the person, much like the coffee, because I had like 100 grams of Cheetos, like buffalo chips, and I didn't get any sex desire that night. But of course, I'm sure if I ate enough, I probably would have. So I think that depends on the person, per person. Raw vegetable and fruit diet leads to disappearance of mucosal discharge and menstruation. Focus on mucusless diet and non-uric acid forming diet. Let's see. So back then, when there were kind of like a trend of like a lot of people no longer being vegan, one of the things they talked about was losing their period, which is, that's their choice if they want to have it or not. It's fine. But it seems like yes, if you reduce your sex desire, then maybe women may not have a menstruation cycle. And I don't think you have to be that extreme. I think you can just adopt slight principles of it. So I'm pretty slight vegetarian myself. Well, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, just because these things are like you have to do this and the author may present it that way, you can just take enough of what works for you and I think it'll be just fine. Alcohol dissolves and removes phosphorus from the brain. It paralyzes brain cells so you're unable to generate electrical currents. Also, alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen, so if you really must have cancer, keep drinking alcohol. Pythagoras learned from Hermetic schools of Egypt to stay on a low-protein diet and avoid sexual stimulants. He taught this to the Greeks. Case of a young woman who lived on raw vegetable salads and fruits, so basically vegan, had high vigor and rosy complexion. She took cold baths every day. She began this routine after she separated from her husband, and she says that menstruation stopped. So, the two main methods we have here is really celibacy and mind, body, spirit, and then of course diet. Any kind of vegetarian, but I think even lowering your meat consumption is going to be just fine. But I thought, what about some additional methods of, to help lower your sex desire besides the two mentioned here? And some of the ones that I came up with was fasting and cold therapy. I mentioned before Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you are uncomfortable, you're not really thinking about sex. I noticed the easiest days to not want to watch porn and masturbate is if I was freezing or if I was hungry. You could have a naked Lara Croft in front of me, doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm not comfortable. I don't think people are comfortable. Your reproduction is it's your priority, a little bit under your destiny, whatever, self-actualization, but it's not the most important thing. Food is more important than that, and being warm and having a place to stay and things like that. So if you, don't starve yourself, but if you're uncomfortable, just make yourself uncomfortable. You're gonna find it's much easier not to want to watch porn or to touch yourself, because you got different priorities going on. So that's one thing that I would say kind of helped with me. Another thing that I do, and maybe it's not a good idea, but I do it, is I associate all bad luck with PMO. So, I had a flood recently, and I just like to blame, I like to blame myself on the porn and masturbation. I think my last relapse was 5 hours. I watched porn and jacked off for 5 hours. And then around that time, the flood happened and my room got destroyed and people were mean to me at work, and I had a really bad client too, a really mean dude. He I think he just wants to work with girls. And so to do that, he'll be really mean to guys. So when I got him, he was really mean to me for no reason. And he just did everything in his power to not work, to the point where I was pretty upset. I didn't do anything. I have my job, but I was really angry inside. And so, they just, we can't not work with clients. They just gave him a girl. I don't think they should have. I think we should be able to not work with people. But that's what happened with that. But anyways, any bad thing that happens to me, I just associate it with PMO. So my dad actually, he had trouble breathing where he passed out and his face was turning blue and he could have passed away. And he talked about oh yeah, when he was almost passing away, he's yeah, I heard really good music and it was beautiful and I was happy. And I was oh my God, Dad. No. But I just assume everything that bad happens is because of PMO. So, now the next time it's man, I really want to watch porn now. It's well, do you want another flood? Do you want another crappy client? Do you want Dad to pass out again? I just tell myself these things and it's well, you don't want these things to happen. So obviously you got no choice. Don't watch porn and don't jack off, So that might not be healthy, but I've done that so far and it's been pretty good. I think my current nofap streak is, it's got to be in the hundreds, 110, 120, so other than the random sexual thought, that just pops up every once in a while, it's been pretty good. So that's what I do. But if it doesn't work for you, then don't do it. I can see it turning out bad, but it seems to be okay for me for now. And then another one is that I use boredom to increase productivity, but I would be careful because if your primary response to boredom is PMO, then you need to readjust that. So basically, I think that was when I jacked off for 5 hours. I was bored. I didn't have anything to do. I was already ahead of the YouTube schedule. All my work was done. And I work 60 hours a week, so there was nothing to do except jack off for 5 hours apparently. So now it's okay, well, you could do that, screw up, or you could do something else. So now my response is okay, if you're really bored, you could play a video game. Now that's not good, but porn is much worse. So now it's just like, which of the two evils do I want? Now I'm just going to choose games over porn. So boredom's a good idea, but if your response to boredom is porn, then obviously that's not a good idea. Or at least give yourself another alternative that's not as bad, and just kind of stick with that. Next, did I adopt any principles of the book? Yes, I did. Mostly the vegetarianism is what I took, and I adopted it in a moderately strict way. I did do it strictly, and then I gave up strictly. So I was vegetarian for 4 months, and I was very strict. I watched everything. Nothing was animal material. But what made me change my mind was that my dad took me to a buffet with my youngest brother. And it was a good one too. It had like really high quality seafood, because usually all you get is shrimp, and that's like the best they do. But this had like mussel and octopus and squid. It had everything. It was really good. Really good high quality omega-3s. I didn't want to miss out on that. You know, I had to have some. And I didn't eat too much. I didn't even eat normal. I ate like less, like controlled. And I felt really bad pain in like my stomach, you know, but not like, I don't know, it was just a really bad pain. Like my body was not digesting, and I think that's what was happening, is that in 4 months of not having meat, I think my body turned off the gene to digest meat. So when I gave it a little bit, even just a little bit, my body like panicked, overreacted, made me feel bad, to the point where I had to go home from work, you know, and I only had one client to go to. I just had to drive 30 minutes and give him medicine. I couldn't do it. I was in really bad pain. So at that point, you know, the question came down to, okay, do you want to never eat meat again? Because that's just my case, you know. And I thought, well, no, I don't. I don't never want to eat meat again. I like the times that I can finally sit down, have dinner with my brother and my dad. You know, I like that. I don't like to go to a place and be like, well, we have to go here because I can't have meat, and we can't do this. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that dude, okay? I just want to have a good time with my family, you know, my brother and my dad. And so I decided, okay, well, no, I won't be strict vegetarian anymore. So what I ended up being is moderately strict. I will have seafood if it's possible, because of its valuable omega-3. All seafood has a high level of omega-3. Nothing compares to it. Plants have nothing compared to it. Seafood is the absolute best omega-3. So if it's possible, I'll take it. And when it's possible, I'll take it. That's that. So that'd be pescatarian. But at the same time, you know, seafood's expensive, so I'm not going to pay for it. So if it's been too long, I will have a piece of chicken, just to make sure that that meat digestion gene doesn't turn off, because I don't want to go through that again. So whatever you want to call that, mostly vegetarian with pescatarian with very little Mediterranean, fine. You know, call it what you want. But that's kind of where I'm at with it, with vegetarianism. I tried it strict. I don't want to live like that, so I ended up being just moderately strict. Now, as far as did it help, I think it kind of helped. The longest streak I had without a wet dream was 51 days, and that was when I was a strict vegetarian. But after that, I think my shortest wet dream was like 11 days. So now I've just been kind of going with where I'm going now, and I think it's been like 30 days, but still, there was a really bad time when it was like every 10 days. But so far it's fine, and that's just kind of what I've adopted so far. What else? I noticed that even though I haven't watched porn and masturbated in like 130 days, even just the thought of it begins like the cycle of the, you know, it just begins something. I can feel it. I can feel it in my groin. If I think of something that I shouldn't be thinking about with a girl, I can feel like pressure in my groin. Like it's like my body is like, oh, I don't know. It's like it's saying, oh, here's a chance to reproduce. Like, nope, no, it's not. I just had a bad thought, you know? It feels like that because I can feel it in the groin. It's like lightning. It feels like lightning to my dick. It feels like lightning to the balls, like something is starting there, and I have to be like, nope, hold on. We ain't doing nothing, you know? So I've never noticed that before in my Kuman days. But now it's like if I make a mistake, then I can feel the lightning moving down to the groin, like it's like, oh, is it time? Is it time to have a kid? Like, no, it's not. That's just something I noticed as well. It's pretty interesting. But again, the best method in all of this is just celibacy and mind, body, and spirit. And then I would even suggest having a lot of vegetables in your diet, moderate, what's it called? Breads, starches, right? Gluten. And then I would say like a little bit of fruit, because like sugar messes with me even if it's natural. But if you can have a lot, it's fine. And then meat would just be a little bit. Now I'm not saying like a little bit, but I'm just saying control it a little bit more. If you're gonna have like this much meat, you need to have like this much vegetables. You know what I'm saying? try to do it like that, I would say. So, some final conclusions for this long ass video. Well, I think for the book, the loss of sex hormones, lecithin, calcium, phosphorus, and cholesterol in the cycle of PMO, it's gonna happen no matter what. You cannot bargain with it. You can't reason with it. Okay. You watch porn, you watch porn, you don't masturbate. You masturbate, you don't watch porn. You entertain sex thoughts, doesn't matter, all right? No matter what, as soon as you start something in your brain, you're already losing all of those nutrients. And again, you lose it whether you actually ejaculate or you lose it if you just urinate it out. So really, you have to be pretty pure in your mind. Why does it seem that reproduction decays the body and continence preserves youth? Well, in this case, I think it's pretty clear that with the guy and the girl, that you both are giving up the very best resources in your body in anticipation of making a child, which is probably our main function, right? Therefore, if there's no prospect to reproduce, then the body just maintains youth by high sex hormones until, there's a chance to reproduce, right? It would make sense that like if you, especially back then before, we got our food from grocery stores, people died. People died pretty early, pretty quick. And so, you have to conserve the sex hormones for a chance to reproduce. And if there isn't one, then just keep it. And if there is, then go reproduce. I think that's kind of the way that our body was designed, in history and stuff like that. So why does weakening sex glands weaken the entire body? Well, I think that might be because the body realizes it can't produce a child, so just accept the generation as its fate, One thing I want to talk about here is that some people might say that, I'm a very sex negative person, or I say that sex is, you can't have fun with it. I mean, based on the science, I would say yes, you maybe cannot have fun with it, or at least restrain and pull in some of that fun, because you're losing a lot of important stuff, and it better be for a good purpose, right? Whether it's a kid or anything like that. And you'll notice as well in NoFap, at least that I've found out in other places like celibacy and brahmacharya, semen retention, they talk about sex energy, And I've talked about it before, but I wasn't really clear on what it was. But I think now it's like, yes, sex energy is the drive for you to go out and do something, to pursue something or complete a goal. I've told before how I wanted to make a YouTube channel, but I couldn't because I was jacking off too much. I couldn't make a YouTube channel. But as soon as I started NoFap, then priorities change. I get a little bit more motivation, more drive, because the dopamine's not wasted. I think sex is like 200% over dopamine baseline. And your dopamine is where your motivation comes from. And it's a limited currency. If you waste all of it, obviously I'm not gonna make a YouTube channel, right? So I thought of it as that way too, as sex energy. You'll see it a lot with your friends. My friends, they used to go to the bars every weekend and they would drink insane amounts of alcohol and try to get sex from random people. That was the goal, that was the plan, and they will buy expensive clothes and expensive colognes and pay for overpriced beer. Once again, stay out till 3 a.m., ruin their sleep schedule, all just for the prospect of getting sex, right? That was it. So if you think about it, imagine you using that same energy, not to buy clothes to impress people you don't care about, but to put it to your career. Make a YouTube channel, work 60 hours a week, improve your fitness, your diet, your health. That's really good stuff. So I really don't, it may sound like it, but I don't think I'm sex negative. I think I appreciate the sacred of sex energy and how you should use it to improve your life, which of course you can help improve the lives of others. So that's my interpretation of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with sex. I'm just saying that it's a huge cost loss. And because of that, it might as well be for something very important. Now, of course, we have to talk about how to handle this in relationships. So I don't know the struggle you guys are going through. I'm just a 35-year-old virgin. But what I would say is that if there was a miracle that I was in a relationship. You know, I don't think that it would be like an everyday thing. I'm sure you guys think that an everyday thing would be a good thing, but you know, you have to think about, you know, what's more important. You got your career, you got your life, you know. Yeah, it's nice to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but you know, they leave a lot, right? The only people that stay are really just your family and God. Okay, everybody leaves if they can't get anything from you. So even if you have a girlfriend and you know, want to be a good guy, and I'm sure you're a good guy, you're a good dude, you know, sex every day really doesn't sound like a good idea, does it? Because you think about, you lose that sex hormone lecithin every day. Oh, but you got to pull 40 hours a week. Are you going to be able to do that without, you know, your sex energy? It's going to be pretty difficult. Maybe you'll get sick more often, and you get less money, then your girlfriend leaves you, you know? So I think that there should be some kind of limit or control, depending on what that is. I think there was a study that said like the amount of time that people want to be in sex, in intimacy, is 30 minutes. So you really shouldn't be trying to go more than 30 minutes, right? And even more is that it depends on your schedule. You know, if I had a hypothetical magical girlfriend, you know, when would the sex occur? I don't know. Would it happen on Sunday? Nope, because I work Monday to Friday. What about after? What about afterwards in the week? No, because, you know, why would I have sex on Monday? I'll be weak on Tuesday. So there's no sex on Sunday because I need my strength from Monday to Friday. And then, okay, well, Saturday. Well, that depends. Am I going to the range for a YouTube film? Then no, we're not. Am I training? No, we're not. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know, maybe somewhere, but it's like, you think about what you're losing if you do that, you know? So again, I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just virgin advice, but I'm just saying, you know, you think it sounds like a good idea every day, but just think twice. Think about how you feel. Think about how motivated are you? Do you have the energy to go to work tomorrow? You know, then maybe you might want to restrain that, pull it back a bit. Okay, so I guess as a final note, I would say that if you're married, you know, good for you if you're married. You know, just remember that sex desire is a response to high protein, okay? And if you had a lot of sex, right, and in this case, you know, with the women, right, remember that the women who have a lot of sex will have more menstruation. Do they seem to be happier to you? Have you ever seen a happy woman on a period? I don't know. I don't think so. You know, so you got to keep in mind that, you know, they're probably not going to appreciate, you know, much more frequent menstruation than usual. And, you know, for myself, being a coomer for like 12 years, you know, I can tell you, jacking off 6 days a week, 6 out of 7, there was never 1 year in those 12 years that was good as 1 year on no fap. 1 year on no fap beat all 12 years of cooming, 100%, you know? So I guess just kind of keep in mind, you know, in your marriage that like, because I know some guys will say that, you're like, well, I haven't had sex in like 3 years. I haven't had sex in like 2 years. Well, okay, but were you not wasting your sex energy watching porn, masturbating, or like having sex thoughts? Probably. Okay, and I'm sure she did too, you know. I mean, girls don't usually, well, girls can watch porn, not usually though, but certainly read books. What's it called? What's the Christian Grey? The 50 Shades of Grey. You know, like they do that stuff too. That's the woman version, you know. So it's like, if you're both wasting your sex energy, then like obviously you're not gonna have sex with each other, you know. But that, you know what? That's a completely different subject. I don't need to be talking about that. You don't need to be hearing about that from a virgin. So basically, that's all I have to say about the book. The Science of Regeneration by Raymond Bernard. It's a very short book, but as I'm sure you've noticed in this video, there's a lot of rambling. You know, he goes through a lot, and it is a short book, but he just jam-packs the information, and he'll jump from one subject and jump to another one. If you thought mine was bad, it was a lot worse. If you thought this video was bad, he jumped around much worse. This is about the most sense I could make out of it in like the weeks that I've been working on it. So still, I do recommend the book if you're on NoFap or you're kind of wondering if you need to be a little bit more celibate than you have been recently. Again, you don't have to pay for it. I like to have physical books. You don't have to pay for it. You can just get it for free online because it's I forget the term. It's the term when it's like it's free because it's like a, I don't know, it's an important work to the culture, I think is what it's called. So I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave it in the section below. Please like a video. Helps with the algorithm. I appreciate that. You know, tell your friends. Tell your friends. You know, if you like anything on my channel. I am gonna try to stick more with martial arts, but like I said, I will usually read books too. I bought a bunch of books just because, like, I'm getting too ahead of my work. I have 60 clients, but like 63 actually. But yeah, I have nothing to do, and nobody really talks to me, so so I just, you know, read a book, you know. So I hope the video was good for you guys. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video, okay? Bye now.
You learned martial arts! Martial arts, good!